Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida. Dude, I'm telling you, dude. Dr. Narco Longo came on and dropped the hammer of the god.
America's mother, daughter of Atlantis. God sent the weatherland. The devil sent the Spanish. Florida is Eden, the fountain of youth. Kali is deception. So Florida is the truth.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Dr. Narco Longo.
Florida is everything. There's too much truth bombs being dropped. I can't digest it all.
Old World, Florida.
Please welcome Dr. Narco Longo.
What's up, everybody? How's everyone doing? Happy Friday, everybody. I'm coming to you live from Lake Worth Beach, Florida. And it's snowing in Florida these last couple days. So we've got that going on. And we're going to catch up on some Florida news on Monday. But tonight we're talking about Uranus, Janice, and the genius Janitor Archetype. That might sound like a mouthful, but it's extremely relevant to what's going on in the world right now, actually. And a lot of Hollywood movies we're going to be talking about tonight. And boom, look at that. Nice. But we got two heavy hitter guests tonight. Two familiar faces. One we haven't seen in a little bit, but we've got Mario from Symbolic Studies. We've got Ben, the archivist. Ben, waking up with analog, however you know him. But we'll start off with Mario. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, dude. I'm happy to be here. Janice is a really interesting topic. And actually, I did a show with someone a couple weeks ago, and they wanted to talk about it. So it was fresh in my mind. Still had my notes and all my points and stuff like that. So have a lot to say. Very curious to hear your opinion about it. And I'm stoked Ben is here too. And I know he's done a lot of research with it and put out videos and stuff like that. It's a fascinating topic.
Oh, yeah. And for those who don't know Mario is Symbolic Studies on the internet. YouTube, Instagram.
Yep.
Symbolic Studies. We're looking at his website right here too. Symbolicstudies.com. He does tarot. He does deep dives on symbols. He does a bunch of etymology too. And yeah, since in the time that I've known him, he's been doing a particularly interesting deep dive on polar symbolism and like Arctic origins. Of course, you study symbols enough, you start, looking at the North Star and etc. But
right.
Yeah, man. What?
Yeah, no, exactly. And the polar symbolism is going to be a topic of discussion tonight for sure.
Cool. What's on your plate nowadays? What are you getting into?
I'm doing a Patreon series on the tarot, and so I'm going through the major arcana. I'm doing basically a presentation on each card. So I'm gearing up to record an episode on the Wheel of Fortune, which is an interesting card. So I've gotten really into wheel symbolism and just everything that kind of that comes with that, which is huge. It's a gigantic topic, So I've been looking into that. I want to do a presentation here pretty soon on the Age of Aquarius and what's going on with that, my kind of interpretation with that. But yeah, honestly, the polar thing really is what drives a lot of my personal sort of research. Even stuff that I just don't even like post online, or I have yet to really formulate a game plan on how to like talk about it. But that's just my main weave, you know, as you mentioned.
Yeah, very interesting stuff. And we've also got Ben here tonight. Ben. What's up, Ben? How you
Howdy.
been since
It's
we
good to
last
be
saw
here.
you?
Yeah, great. It's been a long time. Appreciate you reaching out and inviting me on. Great subject, too. So I'm looking forward to this talk.
Well, I know Janice is your cup of tea, and we haven't seen you on YouTube in a little bit, but that's all right. Glad to have you back. I know a lot of people have been missing you. A lot of people have been reaching out. But now's your chance to show some support, guys, if you haven't seen Ben in a little while. And we're going to dive into it. Oh, here, let's look at your... Sorry, I don't have an assistant tonight. I'm shuffling a couple things. But this is Ben's YouTube channel, The Archivist. If you want to go subscribe, guys. Look at that. He's got a video about Janice up already. Lots of
that's
stuff.
weird. It's funny that that's the one that pops up for you. That's great. It's like it's reading your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a few other videos where I talk about astrotheology. I do one where I break down January. I talk about Janice a little bit more in those as well. In the astrotheology one, I kind of cover a myriad of topics. But that interview right there with Black Sheep Researcher, he's been a friend of mine for 5 or 6 years. And I was glad we could finally get together and do a little video. And yeah, so if people want more information after this chat, there's more stuff to watch there. Yeah. So thanks for sharing.
Sure, yeah. And Ben does a lot of work with old articles, old newspaper clippings, you know, deep diving on what was recorded back then and lots of good stuff. That's his angle. It's a very unique kind of approach to all this. And he really is the archivist. If there's any, you know, obscure subject that you think people haven't really charted yet in this community, I think again he's probably got some articles about it.
Yeah, and I owe my entire channel to you, so I again very grateful. And you know the newspapers brought us together.
Hang on. You're not Juan. That's not. Hang on. No, just kidding.
But yeah, so you know, I'm grateful to you for that and pushing me to start the channel. I mean, I don't even remember 2,500 subscribers before I ever made a post on YouTube. So, and that's all thanks to you. And if there was somebody to get me out of my semi-retirement from YouTube, it'd be you. So I'm grateful to be here, and this is a perfect subject.
out of your shell because you're a Cancer.
Right? Absolutely, and it's cold. It's that time of year where you're under the rock. I've been hibernating for sure.
Mario, you're a Cancer too, right?
I am, yeah.
Nice.
Wait, what date?
July 2nd. How about yourself?
July 2nd.
Oh shit! Right on. Damn.
What year?
84.
86. Right.
Okay, right on, man.
Oh, shit.
Awesome. Here we go.
Cheers. What are the odds?
Right.
Things are.
Have you seen my? You should look. I have a video. Maybe we'll talk about this off air, but I have a video about July 2nd and how important the 182nd day of the year is.
Ooh, nice, man.
It's the capstone of the pyramid. If you make the calendar into a pyramid, July 2nd is the capstone. And the numbers are significant with Janus and 11. Yeah, it gets pretty crazy. So
dude.
We'll have to talk after this, and I'll send you
Absolutely.
the video. It's pretty awesome once you dive into that date. And it ties in with Sirius, the dog days, and yeah. Anyways,
nice. I'm into it, man.
Yeah, funny enough. What a coincidence.
That's crazy. I had no idea. I wasn't planning on that. That makes sense though, that we dropped such mega truth bombs together, and you guys were, you know,
that is funny,
right? Yeah, there you go.
That is funny. Yeah, there's that. Yeah. Anyways, keep going.
let's dive into it, guys. We're talking about Uranus, Janus, and the genius janitor archetype. So, number one, why we're talking about this. It's January. Okay. How many people give any thought to, where the names of our months come from, right? January comes from Janus. Janus is a Roman god. Some say goddess. It's a little ambiguous a lot of the time, right? Because this is the god with
Oh,
two faces.
absolutely.
So often at times it's a masculine and feminine. And we're going to see that gender neutrality or ambiguity, androgyny, is a theme with not only Janus, but also the planet associated with Janus, Uranus, and then the zodiac sign that Uranus rules, which is Aquarius. So you're going to see this theme of gender neutrality or ambiguity, right? With Janus, Uranus, and Aquarius. But just to start off, Janus is one of the most interesting deities that there is. Why? Because it's associated with one of our planets, Uranus. But Uranus is the only planet where we use, or only major planet. I got to be careful here. Only major planet where we use the Greek name instead of the Roman or Latin. So Janus, you can roughly equate to Uranus and some other deities, but Uranus, Eanus, Janus, you can bend this pronunciation and see they really are the same word, the same deity, and identifying the same planet, Uranus. And we're going to see all those jokes about Uranus, right? Those all play into the Janus Aquarius LGBTQ, theme behind Aquarius, Age of Aquarius.
The new age.
We're not promoting this stuff, just cataloging it, right? And making sense of it. But Janus is the only planet. Uranus is the only planet that we use the Greek name. And that's Uranus, however you want to say it. But we ended up with Uranus. So, number one, we're going to be asking that question tonight, and we're going to do our best to kind of explain why did we go with Uranus? Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, these are all Roman gods, the Latin names. Why did we go with Uranus, right? It's the only major planet. It's sometimes visible to the naked eye, so you could maybe consider it a major planet. But that's where we're going to start off on tonight. January comes from Janus. This is Aquarius also. We just stepped into Aquarius about 5 days ago, January 19th or the 20th, the first day of Aquarius. Uranus rules Aquarius. And just to start off on the etymology, you have Janus, Uranus, and Aquarius. Okay. From Janus, we get words like genius, janitor. And janitor, what does a janitor do with their keys? They jangle, right? Isn't that an interesting one? Jangling keys. Janus is said to be the god or goddess of doors, portals, frames, beginnings, a whole lot more, I'm sure, but those ones especially. And you're going to see that the janitor, most people associate janitor with cleaning up, bodily fluids, right? Or pee and poop, right? Well, the janitor gets his name from the keys. Holds all the keys to all the doors. Think about the symbolism behind that, right? So, but also the more, the nastier kind of part of the job, cleaning up pee and poop. Well, we just have to look at the word Uranus. Urine and anus in the same word. And janitor certainly, deals with a lot of that stuff. And yeah, that's just a little bit of the etymology that comes to mind. But I'll hand it off to Mario here, so I don't ramble too much. But
No, yeah, dude.
what's there to say just starting off about Janus and Uranus?
Yeah, Janice, well, you showed a janitor, right? And just briefly, and they have the mop or the broom or something like that. And I think it's fascinating that they retain the key dynamic, but they also retain having a symbolic scepter or a symbolic pole, basically, right? And what I found in my research is that a lot of figures that are well known for being associated with a staff or a walking stick, I'm thinking of like the Fool, right? The first card of the Major Arcana. He always has a stick with him. Sometimes he even has two sticks with him. There's a lot of figures like the Green Man. The Green Man always has like a branch with him. Sometimes he has a whole entire tree with him, right? And essentially, what I found out is that a lot of figures that do have that scepter or staff, they're like wisdom keepers from like a different age. They have a lot of information from a previous age is the way I kind of look at it, right? So Saint John the Baptist, he always has like a staff with him, or he has a really long crucifix, something along those lines. And to me, what this goes back to, and I'm going to be repeating this with a lot of stuff related to Janice, but this early tradition that I track that's very polar in nature, you can refer to it as the polar tradition, the northern tradition, the primordial tradition is what a lot of authors have referred to it as. It's also been referred to as the mystic pole tradition, because the pole is like a preeminent main sort of symbol. And in my opinion, the pole represents essentially the world axis, right? The axis mundi. And the world axis is a gateway. And so when we're referring to the keeper of the keys, right, and Janice being related to doorways and things like that, I see this being related to the world axis and sort of this stairway to heaven concept that a lot of other authors have kind of attributed to the northern sky. A lot of cultures have referred to as being basically the stairway to heaven going towards the north, the North Star, things like that. So I see a lot of northern polar symbolism with Janice. I see a lot of mercurial symbolism with Janice. I think Mercury, too, being like androgynous in nature, I think relates to that as well, right? There's a ton to kind of pull at just with that. So I'm sure over this conversation here, we'll pull out that thread. But yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something about that?
Well, no, that's a good point. Is Mercury and Juno often having this kind of blur, lines being blurred between Juno and January. A lot of etymologists for a long time swore that Juno and January had something to do with each other. And there is a parallel that's kind of little understood. But I also want to reiterate here, we're talking about the genius janitor archetype. So janitor holding all the keys to an institution, a building, right, a facility. It's representative to a degree of wisdom or kind of hidden wisdom, right? Maybe even occult wisdom to a degree. And to be the custodian of something or a steward, right? That's always hold like a great spiritual significance and honor. To be a custodian is like, man, they trust you no matter how poor you are. They trust you with all the belongings in this building, right? Now, what comes along with that is being able to peek into all the rooms, all the offices. As you can see, we're looking at Goodwill Hunting here. I've never seen Goodwill Hunting, but you'll notice that very often in movies, the janitor is often giving advice, or the wisest person in the whole movie, or knowledgeable, or knows people's secrets, right? And we're going to see that it kind of has become a trope in Hollywood movies to see the wise janitor archetype, stereotype. And where does that come from? Well, like I said, Janus is where we get the word genius. In Christian mysticism or Christian symbolism, the angel is associated with Aquarius. Angel, Aquarius, that's not exclusive to Christianity. But in other parts of the world, like the Middle East, you have concepts like the jinn, right? And some will say that jinn comes from, or genius comes from the word jinn, the genie in us. To quote, what's his name? Phil Spector. Genius is the genie in us. Okay? Which, no matter which way you look at it, though, there's this angelic component to the to genius, right? That it's like, oh, this information didn't come from me; it came from somewhere else, right? I'm borrowing it, right? How many composers, musicians, great geniuses have said this? That they even have a sense of guilt because they owe their genius to something else, right? Even an alternate persona, right?
Well, who plays the main character in this movie?
Matt Damon.
Who's this actor on screen? Matt Damon. What's a Damon?
Oh, wow.
Excellent.
Yeah.
He's the genius. I mean, in the definition of Damon, right? This is where actually the word demon comes from, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Greek. So in Matthew, which means gift from God or God's gift, extrapolated, you just basically have two faces of the same thing. So there's no coincidence that Matt Damon's playing this role. That's how it goes. When you find little nuggets or Easter eggs with movies, the more you look into it, you'll find numerology of the release date, the length of the movie, and the characters playing these people. It's just going to extrapolate.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Wow. Look at that, guys.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Bingo. Dropping bombs already. So Matt Damon, by the way, people think demon. Originally, this kind of just meant angel, like a lesser deity in the heavenly realm or angelic realm or something. Damon.
And people would often say that the muse was the daemon, the inner voice. Writers, painters, the arts were often guided by that kind of subconscious connection, and the daemon would be the bridge, the muse.
Yeah. So Damon, you can connect to a genie or an angel. An angel goes back to Aquarius, which rules the ankles. So I know Mario and I have talked a little bit about some puns and stuff like this. When you're standing up, if you're standing up straight with your hands by your side, you only have one angle on your body. That is your ankles. So if your feet are flat on the ground, you have a 90-degree angle at your ankles. It just so happens that Aquarius rules the ankles, that part of the body, and it's the angel in the zodiac. It's either the man, the water bearer, typically the angel. Yeah, so Damon, genie, genius, going back to Janice as well. But yeah, what else is there to be said?
Well, I mean, what's the character's name too?
I don't know. Please,
Will
please tell
Hunting.
us.
Will Hunting.
Will Hunting. Oh, okay.
And will, that's a given, right? To be chosen, a path, and then Hunting. He's a character in a movie who's on a path. I mean, it's just like, the building blocks. Like there's no coincidence that that's the name. It was chosen by the character played by this man, Matthew Damon.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, again, people may say that you can read into these things too much, and that's certainly possible. But
That's
this
what
is
we're doing.
it's a great movie, and it deserves to be broken down. And there's this Janice, kind of overseer Damon archetype that's often portrayed as a poor person or a homeless man or an older grandparent. This wise, methodical person who's in the background, who sees all of the uh, forthcoming events. He like knows your follies, the mistakes you're going to make, but how it's going to lead to kind of polishing that rough stone.
Mhm.
Um, in all these Hollywood movies, that archetype is there. The
Yeah.
the outer mask may be slightly different, but you're going to find that the storylines are the same. And again, we mentioned off air, but Joseph Campbell, one of my favorite authors, he breaks down this archetype better than any author I've ever come across, and he calls it the hero with 1,000 faces. And yeah, so that's kind of a rambling there, but
No,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
well,
completely
we're off
relevant.
to a good start with the Matt Damon will hunting stuff. And
We're-
I challenge anybody to just use etymology, and there's so much in your own name and your own birth date, and
right.
let alone Hollywood films. So if there's a
Yeah.
movie you really resonate with, I bet you could do this, and you'll be amazed how much similarities you find beyond just the surface level story.
Now, a commenter pointed out Matt is. I wonder if Matt Damon is short for Matthew. In which case, he would
Yeah.
be a math
Mhm.
genius. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Good comment.
Yeah.
But here, let's just go down the list here so everyone can kind of get on board with this concept of the genius janitor archetype. So Goodwill Hunting is the best example. He's quite literally a math genius who solves these math problems, equations in his spare time or while he's working, right? He's not expected to do this. He does this for fun, kind of. And he's really good at it. We'll read more about the movie here, but this is the best example. And you'll see this was like the breakout hit. I think this launched the careers of Matt Damon, Ben Affleck. Robin Williams was probably already pretty well established guy, but then second to this, I would say you have Nelson Mandela. Oh, whoops! I meant to say Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, who plays God, the janitor. God, the janitor, in Bruce Almighty, the movie Bruce Almighty. I grew up watching. I've definitely seen Bruce Almighty like 20 times. Morgan Freeman plays God, or someone. He's God who's disguised as a janitor, right? Or angel. You could interpret it as like a emanation, right? A manifestation of God. It's not who I'd pick for my manifestation of God, but that's like kind of that's the angle that the movie's taking, is Morgan Freeman pretending to be a janitor so that he can hear this guy's real thoughts, see how he reacts to his life kind of falling apart. And then there's kind of like a challenge where he says, okay, you be God for a week or something like that. And now Uranus, I wouldn't necessarily say is God, but Uranus is, you could say, the sky father, the father of heaven. That's often how Uranus is termed. And also that just knowing everything, right? Knowing everything, like this character knows everything about Jim Carrey is the like lead actor in this, who's kind of playing God or gets to play God for a week. Well, guess what? Jim Carrey, when he was growing up or before he had his big break, he himself was a janitor. You
Yep.
guys know that?
Mhm.
So you've got that coming into play with this. And then whoever saw The Breakfast Club? In The Breakfast Club,
Great movie.
you have the janitor. I don't remember his name, but the janitor, he basically has this like aura about him, this mystique, where he says something on the screen here. He says, I am the eyes and ears of this institution. It's almost like a cult creed, right? It's something, it could almost pass as like a password to like a secret society or something. I am the eyes and ears of this institution. So the janitor, he's kind of letting people know he knows everything about them. They know all your secrets. He alludes to the fact that he knows the kid he's talking to. He knows where his drugs are. He's been covering for him or something along those lines. But very wise guy too. He gives advice very often in the movie. And yeah, who ever watched Scrubs?
Well, before you
Go ahead.
get away from Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman played God in Bruce Almighty. Have you seen that one? Or Evan Almighty?
Yeah. That's like the part 2 of Bruce
Yes.
Almighty, right?
And that's where the Noah archetype
Oh, yeah.
comes into play.
Oh, wow. Oh,
And
okay.
and
We'll get into that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just
I
wanted to
also,
throw that in
before
there.
we get off of Morgan Freeman too, there are some people who think that basically think that Jimi Hendrix turned into Morgan Freeman, that Morgan Freeman is the second or final act of Jimi Hendrix's career. And when you see a side by side, I'm not saying this is exactly what I think, but it's pretty crazy how similar they look. So I thought that was funny that you mentioned Mandela. That this is another one.
Right. Yeah, the Mandela effect, a big part of the Mandela effect conspiracy, cloning, celebrity replacement theory, that Morgan Freeman either is Nelson Mandela, played Nelson Mandela, or he was like Mario said. I think these might be two entirely separate conspiracy theories, but that Jimi Hendrix is, got killed by his record label. If anyone's into Band of Gypsies, okay, very interesting lore around when Jimi Hendrix lost his life. Jimi Hendrix was in a band with 2 white dudes, and I'm sure they were great, but he was under contract, and that was not the band he decided to be in. Then he gets kicked out, or he's done with his record label, right? He fulfills his obligation, and he's kind of free, something like that. And he starts Band of Gypsies. He didn't want to be Jimi Hendrix anymore. He wanted to be the Band of Gypsies with Buddy Miles and I forget this guy's name. Someone else.
Well,
bass player. 2 black guys.
We're going on so many. Yeah, the Club 27 stuff. We could just go on a whole nother route. Break
There you
away,
go. Yeah.
go into all the Club 27 musicians. You're familiar with that?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And
But there is
takes us to the Saturn return.
Mhm.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Great astrologer I used to listen to a long time ago that would talk about the 27 Club is the Saturn return for these musicians. And yeah, the 27, 28, again, obviously there's a bit of a discrepancy there, but all of those people in that club tie in with these archetypes very strong.
Billy Cox on bass. Thank you, Rumpole on the hill. Old chap. Billy Cox on bass. There was a motive for Jimi Hendrix to disappear back then, because there was this dispute with his record label. He goes and starts a new band. Jimi Hendrix Experience was no more. Then he gets Buddy Miles claims that Jimi Hendrix got poisoned with bad acid, and that they sabotaged Band of Gypsies to make him go back as Jimi Hendrix, his handlers. And Buddy Miles has said that with his own mouth. Very cool interview. So there is something to this, that Jimi Hendrix might have gotten disappeared or had to go into hiding, something like that. But Nelson Mandela, Morgan Freeman, who knows? You know, it would be interesting. But also, the Mandela effect is the theory that a lot of things in the past have changed. I'm not a big Mandela effect guy, but it's basically like the Berenstain Bears, Bragg's, apple cider vinegar, things that people collectively remember differently than other, large groups of people. But, well, here we also have whoever watched Scrubs. This guy's from Scrubs. Sitcom.
Mm-hmm.
Reruns.
Zach Braff.
All the time on Comedy Central. I grew up on this. Didn't particularly like it, but it was always on. And you'll see that the janitor is the wise one. He's always giving advice. He kind of knows all the secrets. He's like a Zen master in a way. It's weird, He's kind of never loses his cool. That's another thing I always see with the janitors. They're always kind of Zen, right? They don't lose their cool. They always have the right thing to say at the right time. And the protagonists often rely on their wisdom in all these stories. So Scrubs, that's a TV show, but that one counts too. If anyone ever saw what's it called? Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. Who watched that show? It was a stupid kid show. They also had like a wise janitor. And I think that janitor played a janitor on a couple different shows. He's one of those like recurring characters. But Scrubs. Then also we have Joe Dirt, right? You could say this is more of a saga. Like he starts out as the fool, maybe, ends as the wise janitor, but Joe Dirt is a janitor. I've seen this movie a couple times. I don't know how much there's just to be said about it. I don't know how well it fits into this, but there's that other janitor. And the last one would be, there's a lot more. Those are the most prominent ones that most people know. But in the movie, not another teen movie, something like that, they actually have a whole scene about this kind of trope or Hollywood cliche that the janitor is the wise janitor. I'm here to offer advice. I'm here. And I think Mr. T plays the wise janitor. But those are the big ones. I think a lot of you guys know that. And that's why we're talking about it. The genius, janitor coming from Janice. Why does Hollywood love to incorporate this archetype, stereotype? It's strong. It's very consistent. I don't want to say they, but why do they push this more than kind of other planetary archetypes? But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, as you're just bringing stuff up, I'm like, wow, this is really fascinating and interesting, because obviously a janitor, most people consider that to be a lowly position, right? And that they're only just good enough to sweep and mop and clean the toilets and everything else. So the juxtaposition between what people think about them versus what they actually know, that's interesting. So there's just something there, I think, that would hold people's interest. But the main thing that's coming to mind right now as you're showing all this imagery is the fact that they take place, in a facility. There's an actual building that they have to be in charge of and clean up and everything else. As you're saying, they know the ins and outs of everything. And so any facility, any building, any space, symbolically, you can say it's essentially the house of God, right? And so but that takes on, you know, when you're actually like in a actual like church, we understand that's the house of God. We understand if you're in a lodge or something like that, they're trying to mirror aspects of the cosmos, you know, things like that. So when you're in a holy place, it's just understood that that is the relationship. But really, any building, including your house, you know, takes on the same symbolism: heaven above, earth below. It's a sacred space. It's like this holy sanctum sort of thing. And so to me, that's what they are, that they're the custodians in the house of God. So they're going to know the ins and outs of the house of God, all the corridors, all of the different hallways, all of the different doors and everything else. Like, they know the ins and outs of that place. One sort of storyline that I think echoes everything that you're talking about here is the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? Basically knowing the ins and outs of this sacred old place, and knowing the secrets and stuff like that, right? So I think that that kind of lines up with this. And clearly, I mean, this kind of lines up too with like the wild man archetype sort of thing. A lot of these people are kind of exiled from society in a way, or they're kind of looked at a certain kind of way. And so to understand, you know, this kind of wisdom puts you in a different position than a lot of other people. And so oftentimes I would say they're misunderstood. That's part of the thing here, is that symbolically they're misunderstood. And kind of to Ben's point earlier about the 1,000 faces of God and Joseph Campbell and everything, I'm finding that personally, the way I decode things, I see a lot of main figures, the protagonists in a lot of films, as essentially being the mercurial figure. I really see that. And they change, and Mercury changes and things like that. But I think that Mercury is a really good example of a lot of figures in movies that end up becoming sort of the hero and end up getting tested and things like that. So that's just my quick 2 cents about everything right now.
You bring up some real good points. I want to touch on the cleanliness part that you brought up, but also Aquarius, you also brought up kind of like isolationism or getting shunned, or
Yeah.
Aquarius is the sign of the zodiac that's very often the most independent, and the sign that's most likely to be alone, end up alone, want to be alone. Aquarius rules divorce, according to what I've learned in the zodiac.
Oh, interesting.
But also, you bring up Mercury. Mercury, a lot of people don't know where to put Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in with their traditional tropical astrology. But Mario brings up a good point that Mercury can be tied up in all this, because in my interpretation, this is just me here, that Uranus is the octave, or you could say the evolved Pokemon version of Mercury, where Mercury rules communication, Uranus rules telecommunication or radio or broadcasting, where Mercury rules media, Aquarius rules social media and technologically enhanced media. And whereas, so everything Mercury rules, Uranus kind of rules to the umpteenth degree, or on steroids. So Mercury rules hermaphroditism. Mercury rules gender ambiguity. It's hump day. It's Wednesday, in between the two halves of the day. So associated with the twins through Gemini, Juno. So we're going to bring up Juno here a little bit and see how the twins, being ruled by Mercury, has a direct parallel and connection to Aquarius and Janus having two faces. So instead of twins, it's almost like Siamese twins, right? There's a word for this too. Janiceps or Jana. When babies come out with two faces on the same head. It can happen, and they call it Jana something. But I want to pull up a quote here that you touched on, something really interesting that kind of ties us all back to the janitor, which is cleanliness is next to godliness. And this goes back to, attributed to John Wesley, but I think a lot of people have heard it in the Smashing Pumpkins song. Zero, Smashing Pumpkins, Zero, I believe, a song by the Smashing Pumpkins. Godliness is cleanliness, something like that. A lot of people have played with that phrase. Godliness is cleanliness, but attributed to John Wesley, they say cleanliness is next to godliness. An English cleric and co-founder of Methodism, Wesley first used the phrase in his 1791 sermon on dress. Now that really kind of brings it home to the janitor being God aspect of Morgan Freeman in Bruce Almighty. Why is the janitor God? Why is God cleaning? Why is God sweeping and mopping? Can't he just snap his fingers? And, you know, there's a virtue in cleaning and cleanliness. And, but yeah.
Right. I'd love to add to this and just say that there's a well-known expression that came out of the Eastern world amongst monks and things like that. But before Enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After Enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. So it kind of just relates to some of the stuff that we're saying here. And then also, I just wanted to add too, if I didn't say it or no one said it yet, but the symbolic value of keeping the place tidy is related to keeping the wisdom of the old tradition alive. That's kind of how I see it. That's what the janitors are doing.
Yeah. Well said. Ben, you want to touch on any of this before we move past it?
No.
Okay.
Enjoying
Cool.
what I'm doing.
Cool. Well, we got $4.99 from Barney Boyle. It's time to put Uranus puns behind us. Okay. Thanks, Barney. And we got a new member. Breakfast became a YouTube member. Oh, wow. Breakfast. That made me think of a good segue here. Janice. Fuck, what's this word called? There's a word that starts with Jan that means it's a contronym. Oh, it's just Janus word. So there's a phrase or something called a Janus word. And that is another way of saying a contronym or a word that is also its opposite. A word that is the opposite of itself. And what made me think of that is break fast. Fast means to go slow and to go fast, if that makes sense. Feast and fast, too. You see a double meaning there. But fast is a contronym. It has four meanings, and two sets of which are contronyms. So a Janus word is it's another way of saying a contronym. Here, I'm gonna have to pull up a Wikipedia on contronyms. You guys ever heard about that? A Janus word?
No.
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
But I get what you're saying.
I imagine it has to do with having two faces, right? Or like looking in a mirror, having opposite meanings. But a Janus word, here, let's pull that up so everyone can see. A Janus word is a contronym, a word that has two opposite meanings. The term Janus word comes from the Roman god Janus, of course, who had two faces that looked in opposite directions. Examples of Janus words: cleave can mean to cut apart or to bind together. Yes, like a cleaver cuts, but to cleave your tongue means to mew, to suck your tongue. Fast can mean moving quickly or stuck, like fastened. Clip can mean to separate or to join. Left, as a verb in the past tense, means to have gone. Where, okay, yeah, whatever.
This reminds me of the power of keys, which is the power to bind and loosen. basically, right? And so to contain something, to tie it up or keep it locked away, and then to free it. And so in that way, I'm kind of reminded of the kind of expression, I guess, what conceals also reveals. And so that's what the power of the keys are. And obviously, we're talking about key symbolism here.
Mm-hmm. And also
Well,
keep. Go ahead.
Frequencies.
Frequencies.
Frequencies are just keys, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, the Pope card in the Major Arcana, the 5th card of the Major Arcana is the Hierophant, right? And so he's modeled after the Pope. And oftentimes he has cross keys right underneath him. He has a silver key and a golden key. And so this has been said that it's the Golden Gate or Silver Gate. It's been likened to the gate to heaven, the gate to hell. There's a lot of different ways of looking at it, but he's the keeper of the keys. He's the keeper of the knowledge, basically. And I'll say too, the interesting thing as well is that he sits between 2 pillars. And so he is operating as like the central pillar, the middle pillar, which I consider to be like the transcendental pillar, sort of the throughway or whatever. And so there's a lot of symbolism too that I see with the Pope and the Hierophant and kind of the tradition there, and Janice as well.
Yeah, we see Janice looking awfully Hierophant-esque.
Oh yeah.
Also has a king's crown on their head, but with the staff too, like you were saying earlier, and the key, of course. Janitor. That's a janitor, guys, holding the keys. And yeah, Uranus being depicted. Let's talk about Uranus a little bit and mythology behind Uranus, its association with the heavens, because Aquarius, in my eyes, is the sign that rules astrology, or at least metaphysics in general, especially the study of the heavens. And angles, mathematics, all that, to me, kind of falls under Aquarius. Science falls under Aquarius. You see some of the most prominent scientists in the world have been Aquariuses. You have Francis Bacon, who's credited with the scientific method, inventing the scientific method. You also have Charles Darwin, I believe, who I don't think very highly of, but he was very influential. He was a scientist. But Aquariuses have a scientific way about them, right? Aquarius is said to be, like I said, the most independent sign of the zodiac. People born under Aquarius tend to be a little bit cold and distant, but they love humanity. They love a good time, socialization, but they like to kind of keep things and experience things from a distance, right? Aquarius is the sign that's least likely and most difficult to bring you in close, right? And to form a very long-lasting, deep connection with. They're in the wind, right? It's like you go to hug them and it's like, whew, it's like there's nothing there, you know? They're very ethereal, similar to Pisces in those regards, that they're very often not present in the body. They're up in the clouds, up in the weather, up in the air. And yeah.
Right, yeah. I think of the fact that the zodiac skews towards water. So the last 3 signs have a watery correspondence, even though they are attributed to different elements, right? So Capricorn is an earth sign, but it's the sea goat. Aquarius is the water bearer, the cup bearer, but it's an air sign. And then the final sign is Pisces, which actually is a water sign, right? And so Aquarius provides waters for the celestial ocean. So it makes a lot of sense, basically, you know, what you're saying with the astrological zodiacal correspondence with Aquarius. Absolutely. And I think of currents in general too, air currents, water currents, right?
Yeah. Totally. And Uranus. Can everyone see my screen here? No. Okay. Uranus. Uranus. Uranus is the 7th planet from the sun. Now I don't know about that. Okay, let's throw Earth in there, and let's say it's the 8th planet. Okay,
100%.
right. You've got, because Saturn is 7.
Yes.
Saturn's the 7th. Jupiter's 6, the 6th, which is why you have the 2 and the 4 in the. Oh wait, yeah, it's a 2 and a 4 in the Jupiter symbol. 2 plus 4 equals 6. It also looks like a 21, so you could say 21, 777, jackpot Jupiter. But Saturn's the 7th sign. Saturn means 7. If you break it down to, it goes back to Sheba, Chabad.
I think Saturn being
Maitan.
founded as the 6th is one of the biggest
Mm-hmm.
follies in modern
And
astrology.
this also goes back to 7, 8, 9. When you tell that joke, oh yeah, 7, 8, 9. Well, who's 7? Saturn. And Saturn consumed, I don't know if he consumed his father, but he consumed his son, right?
Yeah.
Consumed his children.
Correct.
And Uranus, I believe also, is it true that Uranus consumed, ate some other things? We're going to have to read. I'm going to have to freshen up on my.
Uranus is outside of consumption, right? If you look at it from a metaphysical storyline, Saturn is, he's like the coder, and the story of him consuming his children is that he consumed us into materiality, right? You can
Right.
see this in the astrological mythos too. And Uranus is beyond that. So materiality starts at Saturn and works
Right.
its way down. So Uranus is kind of this considered a celestial body, but has very few similarities with Saturn and the ones below it.
Yeah.
Kind of
Thank you.
separating himself as not God, as you started this show by saying, but kind of that transitory barrier. People
Yeah.
go as far as to say that he was the heavens or the firmament, and what lie beyond him was beyond our realm of understanding.
Well, now that tracks 100% because within the Ptolemaic world model, you have the 7 spheres of the planets extending outward from the terra firma, right?
Right?
Concentric circles outward from the terra firma.
And
Now,
frequencies follow that guideline too.
the outermost of the terra firma, or the world subject to matter, is Saturn.
Right.
So Uranus is the first planet that you reach when you go past the realm or the sphere of Saturn. And Saturn does rule the material world. Saturn is when it says Saturn or Satan is the Lord of this world in the Bible, that's talking about Saturn. And this will clear a lot of things up for people who are hung up
The
on,
Reaper.
on the Gnostic demiurge. Is you can escape the duality hang up by approaching this from the astrological perspective. You can see the 7 faces of God, right? We're not saying Saturn is God. We're saying Saturn is one of the lesser emanations of God who does preside over time and space, chronos and rhea, chronological time, area, rhea, space and
Dimensions.
time.
Yeah.
Everything that falls under space and time ruled by Saturn. So Ben brings up a good point that Uranus is what's next. And that's why Uranus is associated, and Aquarius, who's ruled by Uranus, is associated with the heavenly realms, the angelic realms, the next stage past the material world, terra firma. You get Uranus. And in Greek mythology, Uranus is god of the sky. And you see that in astrology. Aquarius, to me, rules the sky and looking upwards at the heavens. Aquarius rules skyscrapers too, and building upwards, right? You also see in Bruce Almighty, he's on a ladder, and he's changing a light bulb. We should have talked about that too. Janice has a slight association with ladders and lights too, and you see janitor too. But Uranus, the god, let's just read along here, is the personification of the sky and one of the Greek primordial deities. According to Hesiod, Uranus was the son and husband of Gaia, with whom he fathered the first generation of Titans. However, no cult addressed directly to Uranus survived into classical times, and Uranus does not appear among the usual themes of Greek painted pottery. Elemental earth, sky, and Styx might be joined, however, in solemn invocation in Homeric epic. Uranus is associated with the Roman god Calus. Now, just real quick here, there's a couple things to touch on. Uranus. Oh, okay. Someone brought up the point that I believe Saturn castrated Uranus. That's the way. Or Kronos castrated.
Yeah, that's why I was saying that's
true, yes. There we go.
That astrotheological understanding comes from the fact that Saturn still has his hand in the material realm while Uranus doesn't. So
Right.
He castrated him because there is no transition between physical matter, right?
Also,
3 dimensions. It
yes.
ends with Saturn.
Now this kind of brings it full circle to the themes of androgyny that we mentioned at the beginning. Why is Uranus, who rules Aquarius, associated with androgyny? Or why is Janus often half male, half female, or neither? Well, we see the castration of Uranus kind of maybe being the explanation for that. But Uranus being a gender neutral or a eunuch. Would you believe me if I told you that Aquarius is the most unique sign of the zodiac? It rules uniqueness, which is phonetically similar to being a eunuch. Well, guess what? Aquarius is the sign most likely to end up celibate, much like a eunuch would, or being indifferent to sexuality altogether. Now, most astrologers will tell you this, that Aquarius, they're so detached from life in many ways, often, that their attitudes towards sex can be kind of take it or leave it, or 10 years without it, 10 years obsessed with it. They aren't necessarily. Yeah, anyone who's met an Aquarius will kind of agree with this. But the fact that the castration story, it emphasizes the androgyny, gender neutrality that Uranus brings to Aquarius, the age of Aquarius that we're stepping into. People are forecasting all this gender neutrality. Again, I'm not for it. Definitely not. Don't confuse us talking about the weather as creating the weather, like we're just forecasting a little bit. But the castration, you guys want to tee off on that at all?
Yeah. That's really interesting. What I'm thinking of right now is, at least from my personal perspective, when I am studying a tarot card that corresponds with the sign, I really think you're looking at a card that basically is another expression of that sign, artwork that's an expression of that sign. So the card that corresponds with Aquarius is the star card. And in my opinion, the star is the pole star. It's the North Star,
right.
The pole star, right? And so we're talking about castration here. And so there's power in the pole. There's a phallic sort of connotation here. And just like what I was saying earlier, these wisdom keepers from previous ages oftentimes have a pole with them. And so it's a neutering of that pole, of that power for Uranus. But one of the other things I was going to say is, are you familiar, Longo, with Ganymede, the story of Ganymede and Zeus and being the cupbearer?
Yes. Also,
it's just interesting. It so perfectly tracks with what you're saying. Because my understanding, at least someone left a comment on a post I did the other day about this, or a while back. But Ganymede apparently was the only human
Holy shit.
amongst the gods, basically.
Yes.
And Zeus kidnapped him and took him up there, right, to be his personal cupbearer.
And Gandalf was gay and had a staff.
That's the thing?
Gandalf has a staff. And
I didn't know he was gay.
The actor who played Gandalf was one of the first famous openly gay actors.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. What's his name? Ian McKellen? Or is that the Hobbit guy? Who plays Gandalf? He is gay. I know that. I saw him at no. I mean, I just kidding. Saw him at the bar down there.
Right.
No, but for real, Gandalf is gay, guys. So Gandalf, with a wizard, Aquarius ruling Urine and rain, Uranus, the rain coming down from the heavens. Dare I say? Wizard, wisdom, PP, the janitor, right? Are we tying it all together here?
Right.
Gandalf, Ganymede. Sorry, continue.
No worries.
Good thread there.
Yeah. No, this might be going a little off topic, but one of the things I've been wanting to mention here with Janice being two-faced, right, is there's a lot of symbolism that actually implies not just duality, but a triune nature. And so it's been related to, Janice has been related to being a master of triple time, and that when you have even two pillars or, duality of any kind, there's like an implied third quality there. Mercury, once again, same thing. There's this androgynous nature, and Mercury rules signs like Gemini, but there's a third quality that is essentially there for sure. And it's more hidden, basically. It's more esoteric. And so when I think of these two faces, I think it's really interesting that there is a hidden third thing. And if Janice relates to the future and the past, really Janice relates to the present moment, right? This ungraspable present sort of eternal moment kind of idea. And then also there is a symbolic pole between them in the spine. And so the face looking to the right and the face looking to the left, there's a symbolic pole that literally is binding them together, the spine, which is an anagram for penis. So for what it's worth.
Right.
But there's more polar symbolism, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, too, when you look at our cosmos, the Janus is called the monad. I mean, the monad is defined as Janus, and when you look at old alchemical scripture, if Janus is in their language, they're using that same reference to describe not only the monad but the lodestone, so magnetism. So whatever your opinion of our realm is in its shape, alchemists of the 14th century through the 17th century, they all described our realm as a flat plane, and we were basically the centripetal plane of inertia, you can call it, in a two opposing magnetic spheres. And so this Janus symbology that we're talking about is multifaceted and covers everything from astrology to magnetism to psychology. It's everything, and that's why it's the most potent symbolic representation of a god, but also of all of this kind of blending of these subject matters that all three of us here have covered for so long. But most people don't acknowledge or see the importance of this character. We'll call him that for the sake of the show, and the potency that his symbology carries.
Yeah, exactly. And the Loadstone, right, is interfaces with the polar mountain, the central mountain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and semen, and it's the prima materia of alchemy. From it comes everything. Without it, you create nothing.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the obelisk. It's on and on. Even we get farther into this, I have an article I want to read, and we can talk about why the, the pineal gland was actually called Janus, because it's the center of the monad.
Well, that would make sense why pineapples have to do with gay stuff. But just to tie
I don't
this
see
in,
the correlation, but
well, pineapples is like a swingers thing, at least in Florida, an upside down pineapple. But don't worry about it. I'm just teasing. I wanted to pepper in here Mrs. Doubtfire, which I've never seen. Thank God, my parents had a conscience. Never showed me this garbage when I was a kid. This is also Robin Williams, and just to piggyback, no pun intended, on this this kind of androgyny theme is Robin Williams, who's also in Good Will Hunting, plays Mrs. Doubtfire, who is a dude dressing up as a woman in order to have more time with his kids. Like he's not allowed to see his kids or something, so he pretends to be a female housekeeper to see his kids. Well, he's also pretending to be a woman, and that is a total, Uranus Aquarius theme here, having a double identity, a second persona, and also pretending to be a woman, more androgyny, kind of more
Right.
hermaphroditism. But yeah,
it's all about masks. Again, for anyone that wants to dive more into the psychological aspects of Janice, again, Joseph Campbell's your guy, and even I'm forgetting his name, the guy who did all the Star Wars movies,
George Lucas.
George Lucas came out and said every single writer worth their weight in Hollywood knows Joseph Campbell front to back.
Right.
It's just rinse and repeat. All of these movies, these Hollywood blockbusters, they're incorporating these archetypes, and that's why it resonates with people so much.
Mm-hmm.
And
now, just go ahead.
No, that's it.
I was just gonna touch on the hero archetype, Jesus, in January. Why is January where it is? Well, you have Aquarius, the sign of the zodiac, ruled by Uranus, who is Janus. But January 1st, which is the day that we orient our entire year around, January 1st is said to be, we didn't talk about this, we didn't bring this up when we were talking about New Year's a couple of weeks ago. I should have. I forgot to. But it is said that, and I know Jesus' birthday is not necessarily December 25th, okay? That this is not the debate over that tonight. We're just going with the commonly supposed birthday, holiday, whatever you want to call it. Christmas, December 25th. If you just imagine that to be the birthday of Jesus, you add 8 days to it, and voila, January 1st makes a whole lot of sense when you consider it to be the day of Jesus's circumcision. Now, another caveat here. Don't roast me if you think that the original Jews didn't do 8th day circumcision. If you think these people or those people aren't the real original Jews, Jesus wasn't Jewish, whatever. I don't care. Not the discussion for tonight. But that's where you get January 1st, commonly said to be the day of circumcision for Jesus. And that would make a lot of sense if that's why we start the year there. It goes back to kind of the castration of God, or castrating the Father. Circumcision, castration, you guys can see the thread there, right?
Yeah,
Very
of course. I
interesting,
mean, And I'm surprised we haven't touched on this yet, but pick up any Bible, Greek, Jewish, well, you know what I mean by that, Hebrew, um, and the strongest correlation that you'll find in that Bible to Janus is Jesus. I mean, Jesus is the door. He says it himself. John, can't remember what it is. John 9. I am the door. Knock and it shall be answered upon you. Follow me, right? And I am Alpha and Omega, right? Janus is the instructor of language, credited with the alphabet, the alpha and omega, alpha, beta, on and on and on. But yeah, so obviously the correlation between the two is incredibly potent.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, exactly. I was going to bring that up. And actually, if we want to continue pulling at this thread, Longo, I included some images in the private chat if we want to show a few of them. It's of a three-faced Christ, and apparently this was outlawed or made illegal at some point by the church. And the reason why I came across the imagery just by being on Twitter today, and I thought it was like perfect timing. So if you want to go to like slide 1, I think you're a bit later in the presentation.
Okay, yeah.
There.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're all good. Okay. Right. And so to me, again, Janus being this two-faced deity, there's an implied third, as I'm saying, right? And my guy, Rene Guénon, he has a whole entire chapter on Janus in his book, Fundamental Symbols. And it's really excellent. He goes through a lot of the Christ-related symbolism to Janus. And so I thought it was a good, perfect synchronicity, actually, that I came across some of this today. So there's a few images here, if you guys care to look. But it's all very similar. But it relates to the 3-in-1, right? Sort of nature of things, the Trinity, in a lot of ways. And so once again, I think that whenever you have two of something, there's an implied third quality that's sort of created there. So I thought this was kind of cool and interesting.
Yeah. Very good connection. And also, some people might be scratching their heads saying, hang on, Jesus is so many things, right? Like the sun, Jupiter, Janus too, or, is that a stretch? Well, let's get down to it. We just showed the Bible quote, John chapter 10, verse 9, that Ben referenced. Jesus does refer to himself as the door. But then also, a lot of people like to talk about the letter J and the letter I, and how the letter J, you hear this out of a lot of people, it's not entirely true, but that J is a recent creation, right? It's only 500 years old now. That's not entirely true. There's been J's for a long time, and the sound J has been around forever. But yes, in English, J and I were very
and G.
Yeah, G, J, I, but J and I and Y also. We're going to talk about Y here.
Yahweh. Yeah.
But J and I switching 500 years ago or so, or being one and the same. So you'll find that Jesus is actually oftentimes termed Iesus. E-I-E-S-U-S. Eiosis or Yesis. Some variation on that. Sometimes even Ionis, right? And Janus is said to be Ionis. I-A-N-U-S. Ionis. But Jesus spelt with an I, you'll see very often, hundreds of years ago. And that does inch Jesus's identity a little bit closer if we're interpreting this astro-theologically, right?
Right.
We're not stepping on anyone's literal interpretation of this. But if we're playing the astro-theology game, this does inch Jesus's identity a little bit closer to Janus. And also to talk about this, who is Uranus and Janus? Well, number one, some people have theorized that Uranus's two faces are Jupiter and Saturn, and that is why Aquarius is often associated with peace or humanitarianism, which would be the benevolence and the malevolence of Jupiter and Saturn being, unified or neutering each other, right? Neutral. To be neutral is an Aquarian concept. Neutered, to be spayed, castrated. Neutered, to be neutral, right? To have a neither masculine or feminine inclination. You see. Okay, so a lot of people said Janus have theorized that Janus is Jupiter and Saturn, one and the same, which would make him the father and the son at the same time. So there are tons of parallels with Jesus and Janus.
And the Trinity too, Father, Son, Holy Ghost.
Right.
You'll see a lot of drawings representing that same concept. Yeah.
So it's
looking into symbolism to prepare for the show. If you just want to go back, actually, if you don't mind,
sure.
There's a Y inside of that triangle, right?
And
apparently Pythagoras, and it was in that tradition to use the Y as a trinity symbol, and that the two branches are like the two ways, and then the sort of the central column is the middle way, basically. And he was writing about this, Rene Guénon, in relation specifically to Janus and some Christ symbolism too. So I just think it's really interesting. It's popping up there in that triangle. So
nice.
Yeah.
What else we have in this folder here?
Oh, this is an old tarot card. And so this is actually the lovers. And I think it's interesting that there's a pole that divides them. And I did a presentation about the lovers card several months ago. And so some of what I included in that presentation I think is relevant, like the androgyne rebus figure. I don't know if you've ever come across it. I'm sure you have. Usually it's like a king and a queen, and there's like a crown that unites them. And so if you want to go to maybe like number 7, very Janus-like number 7.
Right.
Right. With that long scepter and everything else. And so, right. So there's a lot of figures like this that have this dualistic, very obvious sort of presentation. So there's a few images here that basically get into that.
Yeah, I noticed the red. Have you noticed the red thread here kind of highlighting certain body parts? I noticed the 3 air signs are kind of plotted on the body with the red thread. Like you've got the Aquarius,
interesting, man.
Aquarius DNA symbol on the torso.
Yeah.
But you've got the waist, which is ruled by Libra, circled in this red fabric, almost like a Kabbalah thing, right? With the red string around the waist, ruled by Libra. The red bracelets on the wrists, ruled by Gemini or Aquarius, but Gemini wrists, and then on the ankles, ruled by Aquarius, you see some more red.
There you
bands, almost like it's marking the parts of the body. But also, all the air signs have this connection to a twin symbolism.
Yes,
believe it or not. You have Gemini, the twins, Aquarius with Janus having the 2 faces, but then also Libra, it rules mirrors, and the scales, of course, having 2 things balanced, but the mirror, Libra rules mirage and marriage. The mirror and marriage. Right, looking at yourself in the mirror. But yeah,
right. Great point with the red threads there.
Toads. Thank you.
I'm not sure. Maybe if you just want to go, yeah, that's the one I was going to pull up. Right. Fushi and Nuwa, I believe is how they're said, but it's interesting to me. It's like a serpentine couple. It reminds me of Kundalini serpents, right? Kind of going up the spine, or the caduceus, the twin serpents going up the wand, something along those lines. But to me, what's so interesting is that the woman is holding a compass and the man is holding a square. So, right, compass and square. You've also got that triangle that's right in the middle, the empty space between them, right, pointed downwards, kind of like what we saw in
Right.
the painting of Christ. And
Yeah.
so, you know, for a long time, right, the compass generally is assigned to the heavens. The heavens have been imagined as being circular or spherical. Earth is oftentimes associated with that square, more square-like in nature or cube-like.
Now, Mario, I can't help but notice this almost looks like a fishing rod, and you said it's a compass or
That would be the
square.
square, yeah.
So
It looks
this
like
is
something's attached to it, though, yeah.
right. The other hand is the other figure is holding on to like almost looks like chopsticks. So that would be the compass.
Yep.
This is the square.
Mhm.
Well, it looks like a fishing rod. Now, is that ridiculous? Well, what else would you call a fisherman? An angler. You're
Ooh, nice.
angling. And look at how, when the fish pulls the rod, it bends and makes all these different angles. But also, Aquarius is the rain bringer, the water bearer. But part of that would kind of be fishing downward into Pisces, right? Because you're coming down across the zodiac, you're wrapping down towards the beginning at Aries. Aquarius really is kind of peeking downward at Pisces, the fish beneath him or her. And I've been hesitant to bring up the letter Y going back to Ingvi and Enki. Enki I associate more with Neptune, but it really comes to the forefront of the Pisces Aquarius cusp. The angling, the healer, Jesus being the healer, right? The heel, washing people's feet, the ankles. And also, if you've ever heard a great fashion designer or what would you call it? When you compose a dance, choreographer, they'll tell you that grace is in the ankles and the wrists. That grace, that like class, right? I guess you could say. But
I love it, dude. Great stuff. The angular or the angler, right? And I like that the square is pointing towards this sort of wheel-like, mandala-like sort of thing. And where do we get angles from? Just like how a compass works, right? There has to be that central point of pivot where things emanate, right? Creating the angles. And so I see it that it's kind of, you might have to stick with me for a brief moment here, but it's like when you imagine a wheel, right? The sacred center is the hub of the wheel, right? And so that's where the reconciliation of opposites occurs in the middle of the wheel. It's the most balanced part of the wheel. Symbolically, metaphysically, I see the outside of the wheel as being related to things outside of self, kind of external sort of dynamics and things like that. The external part of the wheel is related to multiplicity. It's related to division, things like that. Getting to the center of the wheel, you become the unmoved mover, right? The center of the wheel is immutable. This is like the North Star. This is like the polar mountain or the Loadstone, right? And so it's the point of pivot for all things. That's what the world axis is, basically, right? And so from the center, just like a pie chart or something, it's all of the lines emanate from the center, just like the spokes of a wheel, right? And so in my opinion, it's like the center of the wheel is like the principle or the top of the hierarchy within that system, right? It's no different than like the top of a pyramid being or the top of a mountain being the apex of that system, right? Going to the center is the apex of that. And so I imagine that the angle thing is related to the fact that they come from a primordial center. Symbolically, you could say that the center is paradise or heaven or something along those lines too, right? And in my opinion, my cosmology is that there are realms above and below, and they're all connected through the center. They're all connected through the central axis, right? This is why the Loadstone and Central Mountain, Polar Mountain idea relates to the stairway to heaven, because getting to the middle of something is getting to the heart of something. And I think that you can access other places by getting to that center. It's not unlike chakras. You know, the chakras are discs or wheels, and they're all connected through the spine, right? But it's from the middle that all of the lines emanate, creating angels or angles rather.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah.
The monad.
Well,
The monads,
here,
yeah, exactly.
one
Yep.
sec, Ben, that I wanted to bring up. A commenter mentioned Anunnaki. Now, this is going to be a good segue into the Noah story that I know Ben wants to talk about a little bit. But the fact that Anunnaki has Anu in it, you're going to see. There we go. Janice has Anu. Uranus has Anu. And yes, you have anus in there. Do you know what anus means in Hebrew? To be forced, to be coerced. Anusim means to be forcefully, the people who were forcefully converted or forced to do something. Now, Anunnaki, we've got a whole lot of different words we can tee off on there. But Anunnaki, we just mentioned Enki a little bit. Now, Enki, Enlil, and Anu, was that right? Their dad, I believe. Something like that. Whatever. That you have this kind of trinity here of these primordial gods who very closely mirror the 7, 8, 9, or the Saturn, Uranus.
6, 7, 8. Yeah.
Yeah, or sorry, 6, 7, 8. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Enki, Enlil, and the third one I'm blanking on. An? Yeah, but An is the Sumerian god of the sky. You see it.
An would be Uranus. Yeah.
Yeah, clearly there. So An, where you get the root Anus, right? Anus. But guess what, guys? This can also, and right there on the artwork, you see a little bit of an Aquarius symbol here. And fish, Pisces, but Enki and Enlil, you see the waves indicating current, right? So another Uranus or Aquarius theme there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the deity on the far right has 2 faces.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Dude. Does Anne have 2 faces? Does Anne always have 2 faces?
Not always, but often. I haven't dove into the Sumerian mythos so much, but they do. I know that it overlays almost perfectly.
Yeah, that's crazy. A good way to point that out. Yeah, 2 faces here. I assume that's Anne. I could be wrong, but someone in the family there. So that all ties together well. But the Anunnaki, I forgot what else I was going to say. But this does link to Noah and the Noah story of Noah's Ark. And Janice potentially having to do with Noah and the rainbow. Uranus, rain from the heavens, the rainbow.
Oh, and what the brain?
Yeah.
Brain is the rain.
Ooh.
Genius.
Water, right?
Bring the rain. Rain bringer, right? Yeah. Brain. Wow.
Noah, the flood. Again, we're going to look at this not as from a literal standpoint because it's going to get too confusing, but from the astrotheological standpoint of the flood, right? Where was Jesus crucified? Golgotha, right? That just means the skull. You have the brain or the water. You know, what are your eye? What is water? It's light. You got your 2 eyes, your 2 hemispheres, and what's at the center? The pineal gland, which is really called the seat of Janus. You could think of that as the monad of the actual living embodiment of this kind of meat vessel that we inhabit to perceive and walk and be a part of this realm. And all of the flood myths, Noah, his ship, you know, what is a ship? Well, it's called an ark. Janus was the god of archways and bridges as well.
Right. An angle, arc. Right.
Right. And the brain is also called the ark. But yeah, I mean,
Well, here, just
The
keep
arc of
going.
the rainbow.
well, here, just to throw some more in there for you to touch on. You noticed Anne there. Well, we also have the goddess, and I guess his consort, Ki, the earth goddess. Going back to Gaia and Uranus, it seems to be Gaia might even stem from the word Ki. I did not know that, but you see there Anne and Ki, the janitor with his key,
Mm-hmm.
right? Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice, excellent.
Now, well, let's talk about Noah a little bit and Genoa and some of the differing myths about Noah's Ark and how Janus kind of. Is there any much more to be said on that Noah's Ark?
Go ahead.
Sure. I have a excerpt if you want me to.
I've got one here too. That Janus rules Aquarius and the zodiac in general. And the zodiac, what is it if not a collection of animals? Zodia, zoo. So Aquarius being kind of associated with the shepherd who keeps all the animals, and shepherds being associated with the staff, the shepherd with the staff, but also the shepherds. Neil deGrasse Tyson would have you believe that it was bored shepherds who invented astrology because they were just staring at the sky. But a lot of people say this mainstream position is that shepherds kind of created astrology out of boredom. I don't believe that. We all know astrology is the one true word of God. In the first chapter of the Bible, God created the signs and seasons. Okay. But regardless, yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. But
You were talking about the ark.
Noah.
But yeah, no.
okay, yeah, and Noah being the keeper of many animals, being associated with Janus being kind of the keeper of the entire zodiac. And Pisces comes in there too. You'll see Pisces. People say Pisces is every sign added up into one, right? You hear people say that the last sign is all of them put together. Infinity, the fin of the fish. But I really pinpoint that to the cusp between Pisces and Aquarius, which is also the biggest gray area in the zodiac. Or both those cusps. You have the leap year cusp around the end of beginning of Pisces, and the cusp between Capricorn and Aquarius is also a little controversial because it starts a little early in the month, January 19th. And February is kind of like that too. But yeah, I'm blanking.
No, good stuff, dude.
I want to read a little excerpt from a book that I've cited for years and years called The Mythos of the Ark.
Totes.
And this is just an excerpt from the chapter on the mythology of the Ark. And if you want more of this, you can find free copies of this on Google Books or archive.org. Yeah, for the sake of time, I was going to read this whole chapter, but I'm just going to skip ahead. Under the word Noah, the same author says, the history of the patriarch was recorded by the ancients throughout their whole theology, but it has been obscured by their describing him under so many different titles and such a variety of characters. They represented him as Thoth, Hermes, Janus, Menez, Osiris, Zeus, Atlas, Callion, Bacchus, Prometheus, Saturn, Dionysus, etc., etc. Among the people of the East, the true name of the patriarch was preserved. They called him Nos, or Nas. Again, nautical terms, all of the water terms come from this.
Ooh.
Sometimes contracted nous. But nous is the Greek term for the mind. Remember what I said earlier about where was Christ crucified, Golgotha, the skull. And Brian proceeds to quote Anaxagoras, who identifies the Eastern Noah with the Greek Prometheus. Promethea, he says, was the mind, the fire. And Prometheus was said to renew mankind by new forming their minds. Think of the flood. Think of it from, again, a metaphysical standpoint. Noah, or Nos, was thus, in all probability, the etymological parent of the Greek word, which I can't pronounce here, new, he having been patriarch or father of the new world. This connection of the ideas of life and mind has been fully shown in my pamphlet on the mythological meaning of the tree and the serpent of wisdom. This guy has a lot of books, John Lake, phenomenal author. The serpent being, on one hand, the symbol of the generative power, and on the other hand, the symbol of the logos or divine wisdom. You also find in a lot of old texts that Janus, the Ouroboros, was also the symbol of Janus. Keep that in mind when we talk about the number 8, infinity, the cyclical nature of life, and Uranus and his placement in this whole thing. The ark is simply another form of symbolism through which the old nature worship found expression. To the uninitiated, Noah's Ark would seem to have not the smallest relation to the Virgin Mary, yet by an overwhelmingly amount of evidence we shall show them to be closely associated. The symbolical of the same mythos, the crescent moon being the navicular symbol that unites them, which again, the crescent moon, me and you, Longo, have talked endlessly about the potency of that symbol, tying it again to America and Atlantis, which I don't think we'll have time to get into the relations to that. And kind of maybe that'll be another episode we do where we try to bring some of this mythopoetical stories into kind of a historical frame. Mr. Didron and his Christian iconography has an engraving of the Hindu goddess Maya, her head surrounded by a glory, pressing her breasts, from which copious streams of milk flow, by which all living creatures are supported, and in her lap are represented the various animals, strongly reminding one of the groups which form the contents of the toy arks in common use today. In a word, Maya, as the goddess mother of nature, is the emblem of the ark, since all existing beings may be said to have been born from her, she being but a symbol of the fertilizing properties of nature. It is time, however, for us to consider the curious light which etymology throws upon the word ark. And this is what I've been saying to you guys since we started talking about this, is breaking down the words, using etymology. And it'll just blow you away, the relations you find in words to the things you're actually seeing with your eyes. Through etymology may sometimes mislead us, yet the study of words and language is the study of which all others throw greatest light on the ideas of which prevailed in the ancient world and on the origin and growth of religious dogma. I'll stop there because it's a pretty long chapter, but hopefully you get the idea of what I'm going after there.
Oh yeah, dude, that was excellent, man. That actually it brought to mind a few things that are completely relevant to Aquarius and whatnot. The first thing I just want to say, it's interesting to me that we started with the janitor. We're talking about Aquarius. We're talking about the water bearer. What's the universal solvent? What do we use to clean most things? Right, water. Right, and so there we go. I mean, that to me is an interesting sort of thing just to bring up. Also, it's been said, I've read several variations on this, that there were some people who believe that the actual floodwaters came from the area of Aquarius, adding more kind of symbolism to the water bearer sort of dynamic with things. Not only did it provide water for the celestial ocean, and right around Aquarius, by the way, there's a lot of like oceanic constellations and things like that. As I mentioned before, Aquarius is right after Capricorn, right before Pisces, but there's like Cetus and there's other like fish constellations and things like that. Also just wanted to mention that the rainbow ended the flood, right? Rainbow symbolically can relate to endings. That way, the end of a rainy season or a rainy cycle, things like that. But what I wanted to mention too is that apparently some Christians associated St. John the Baptist with Aquarius. So baptism, right? A cleansing of water, related to what I was just saying about it being the universal solvent and everything else. And related to that as well, actually, before I get into this, because there's a whole entire thing with the solstices we should talk about, the winter solstice and the summer solstice, and how, like, in Freemasonry, they're related to the two St. Johns. And according to Rene Guénon, this completely ties into Janus symbolism. And he really relates Janus to being related to the two solstices being gateways and things like that. So we'll get into that. But I just wanted to mention before we do, Mary and the relationship Mary has with Aquarius. It's really sneaky. I just uploaded a video today. It's kind of a remix video that I've made and put out there a few different times. But Mary was once referred to as Stella Maris, the star of the sea. The star, in my opinion, is the North Star, basically. And so that's like the main preeminent star with sea navigation, early sea navigation. And even if you are basing your navigation route off of other stars, in my opinion, it seems as though it has to be in proximity to the North Star. Where is it in relation to the North Star? So she oftentimes is standing on a crescent moon as well, this arc, right? And the crescent moon symbolically is related to like boat arc symbolism and things like that. But she was referred to as like the guiding star for Christ too, as well. So I think what the church did, I think the church took a lot of North Star symbolism, which there's a lot of North Star symbolism related to like a patriarchal figure, a masculine godlike figure, and then also the goddess. There's a ton of goddess symbolism with the northern sky. And there is some information about Mary being this star of the sea, pretty much. And there's even images of Mary literally like in front of an ocean with that star like in the background and ships, you know, on the ocean and things like that. So I see a lot of Aquarius symbolism with Mary as well, which is what my video that I uploaded today pretty much is about. But what were you going to share with us, dude?
Well, you touched on one thing I want us to talk about a little bit, which is the fixed cross of the zodiac. The there's cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs of the zodiac, and being 12 signs in a wheel, you can make a cross with either the cardinal signs, the fixed signs, or the mutable signs. Then you bring up the solstices and the equinoxes. That Aquarius is often associated with the other four or the other three fixed signs of the zodiac. And also you bring up John the Baptist, not the same John, but if we're getting astrotheological, you can really play with the deities that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have often been represented in Christian iconography artwork as the four fixed signs of the zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
Some people even interpret this to be the golden cross, the golden X, the golden age. Even one of the interpretations of the golden age is that it's the fixed signs of the zodiac, meaning a cardinal sign, a cardinal age is too constructive. A mutable age is too destructive. It's the fixed age in the middle where you have the most kind of temperate, balanced conditions for prosperity, at least from a human civilization perspective, especially the age of Aquarius. We're humans, and this is the age of humanity. But you see here that if you're going off the order Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, John is also Ian. John, Sean, Ian, Jan, Yanni, Eon, Gene, Genes. Aquarius rules genus, janitors, genes, right?
John is a name that trace it all back through the etymology. It goes to Janus.
Or Gianni, the silent G that you find in words like gnosis, going back to Noah, like Ben talked about.
Gian was another word for priest or king. And this is where all of the Tartary titles came from, right? Even beyond Tartary, right? Khan is just John, Janus. So these kingly titles come from Janice.
Well,
Yeah.
Ian, John, you can take the J, turn it into an I, you get ion. Aquarius and Uranus rules electricity
Yep.
and genius and invention. And that's something that we haven't really touched on. Uranus rules genius, especially innovation and invention. New lightning strikes of genius. Aquarius rules lightning as well, according, in my interpretation. But if we look at John and flip the J to an I, both John the Baptist and John the Revelator have the same name as Uranus, Ian, John. And you see here that you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Bull, Taurus, Lion, Leo, Eagle or Hawk, Scorpio, and then boom, the angel as Aquarius.
Wow. Yeah.
And what is that, a unicorn at the middle, maybe?
Yeah,
Just
I meant
a
to mention that
horse.
earlier when we were talking about unisex,
Yes. Well,
unique.
right. The unicorn can fall under a lot of different zodiac signs. But in terms of unicorns being like a code word for being gay or something, or being representing rarity, like, oh, that's a unicorn. That's the unicorn of video gaming, right?
Yeah, unique.
That means something super unique. That is associated with Aquarius.
Yep.
Sitting right next to Capricorn. Maybe you would expect to find the unicorn, right? But
Well, and their horn was supposed to be a rainbow, the color.
True.
And there's a lot of water symbolism that gets associated with horses as well, and water gods that are attributed to, like, creating horses or just being heavily related to them in different ways.
Well, the seahorse isn't it the letter J? The seahorse is a letter J or G. If you look at how it curls, it's the letter J or G. So J for Janice, J for Janice, J for the fishing hook also, by the way. The J.
Nice, yeah. Definitely. So I'd love to get into the solstices just briefly with all of this. So once again, I'm leaning on the work of Rene Guénon, and he essentially breaks down that Janus is preserved in the Freemasonic tradition as the two Saint Johns. So you have Saint John the Baptist, Saint John the Evangelist, and they relate to, in that system, the winter solstice and the summer solstice. The winter solstice, and I think he's correct with this, I put out a video about it, that the winter solstice traditionally corresponded with the north. The summer solstice traditionally corresponded with the south. The summer solstice is often referred to as the gateway of man. The winter solstice is referred to as the gateway of the gods. I think Christmas essentially is a winter solstice holiday. I think our New Year date, January 1st, is essentially a winter solstice holiday, basically acknowledgement. It's all right there around the same time. And what's really interesting to me is that you will see images of St. John, the Evangelist and Baptist, on two sides of the monad. This is like a common Freemasonic illustration, right? And so they almost are symbolically operating as like two doorways, two gateways related to Janus symbolism. And he was saying that the tradition is that St. John the Evangelist is considered to be laughing and St. John the Baptist is weeping, and that this corresponds with their winter solstice, summer solstice dynamic. Winter solstice would be laughing because the sun is actually returning, and then St. John the Baptist is weeping because the sun is starting to wane and descend, basically.
Yes. Can I punch in right here?
Just real quick, and then I'll wrap it up. And so basically, this reminds me of the two masks as well, of like drama. Laughing and crying, basically, which is very Janus related. Oh, really? Sorry.
No.
And then Ben brought up the mask thing, and I thought that was so appropriate, but that's what it reminded me of. The John who weeps and the John who laughs.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. I was going to try and say that.
You totally got it, yeah.
And just linking it to Capricorn and Cancer. Capricorn being tragedy and comedy, but Cancer being jovial nature, Jupiter ascending, or Jupiter exalting. Saturn being tragedy, Saturn rulership. You see the comedy tragedy there with, yeah,
Yeah, you got it.
pretty much.
Exactly.
You want to, was there more?
Oh no,
You
that's
had
what I
on-
got for that.
on
Yeah.
that? That's a good thread. And The Mask, too, going back to Jim Carrey playing The Mask, being a janitor early in life, being in Bruce Almighty Next to God, playing The Mask also. Very goofy. Also, Aquarius rules animation and cartoon characters. And cartoon caricatures, Aquarius are caricatures. They're one of the most animated signs, on the same axis as Leo. They can be very eccentric. And caricatures, the word random too. Random. I should have mentioned the guy from Scrubs. He was known, the janitor in Scrubs was known for improvising all of his lines in the show. You guys know about that?
Oh wow.
Random. Uranus rules randomness too. And to be, you also find, what's it called? Valentine's Day in Aquarius. Not necessarily January, but in Aquarius, you have Valentine's Day. And I think Mario brought up the Lovers card earlier, being associated with Gemini. June being a sign for twins, and then January being kind of conflated with Juno a lot of the time. Why is Valentine's Day in Aquarius? When Aquarius rules divorce, it rules detachment. It's more of a friendship sign rather than a romance thing. Well, Valentine's Day largely started about friends rather than romantic partners. That's one side of it. Another side of it is that, how do I tie this back to the word randy? Okay, means to be horny. In, like, if you're English, randy means you're horny. Well, we're also talking about the unicorn, horn, going back to the same word. People used to look for the unicorn horn to make aphrodisiacs out of. And I find that Aquarius is the sign that kind of needs aphrodisiacs the most, if that makes sense. Like they're not in that lust state necessarily. They kind of have to. That's a big task for Aquarius to tackle, is like living in the body. And that's one of the biggest issues that partners of Aquariuses have, is saying, I feel like there's nobody there. I feel like there's a cloud. I'm dating a cloud, I'm climbing into bed with a cloud. But Aquarius is aphrodisiacs, the corn, the horn, going back to that. And I forgot where I was again, but I wanted to also talk about Janice a little bit, and how we noticed that Uranus earlier. Uranus had no cult of his own, or at least no well-preserved cult that kind of survived and kept the tradition or lineage. Well, Janus is actually largely the same way. Janus was a deity that didn't have his or her own cult. Let me see this here. Janus had no flamen or specialized priest assigned to him, but the king of the sacred rites himself carried out his ceremonies. Isn't that interesting? Janus had a ubiquitous presence in religious ceremonies throughout the year. As such, Janus was ritually invoked at the beginning of each ceremony, regardless of the main deity honored on any particular occasion. So again, like kind of a randomness or an omnipresence, right? Being associated with Janus here. And yeah, that was all. Just wanted to make sure we're not leaving anything out here. We're going to wrap it up pretty soon, but finishing final thoughts, guys. Anything that needs to get mentioned?
Yeah, I want to share something really quick.
So it's
I should share my screen. I am. This is a book from 15th century. Just a small little excerpt. This is mostly an alchemical book, but this is a chapter I loved. And it's kind of always been my favorite to fall back on. The phenomenon of the lodestone, whose wit had the best edge and came nearest the slitting of the hair, is who said that the lodestone is the real Janus because of its two opposite faces or poles, one whereof confronteth the north, the other the south, or his who called it the egg and the epitome of the terrestrial globe.
Wow.
Because as the egg contains the idea of the whole and every part of its protoplast or generant, doth the
Protoplast.
protoplast, yeah, generant. So doth the lodestone comprehend the idea of the whole and every part of the earth, and inherit all its properties, being generated thereby, at least therein, or his who named it the nest of wonders. Because as a nest of boxes, this is think of like the frequency keys, the nested spheres, the spheres of the terrestrial bodies, musical notes, on and on, colors. It includes many admirable secrets, one within another, in so much that no man can well understand the mystical platform of its nature, till he hath opened and speculated them all one after another, or his who affirmed to be the antitype of the poet's Hydra, because no sooner hath the sword of reason cut off one head, or capital difficulty, but two new ones spring up in the place of it. Nor ought any man to hope the total and absolute conquest thereof by the cauterizing the veins of every difficulty, i.e., living not so much as the seeds of a scruple. Anyways, it just goes on. But I just thought that was such a great paragraph, kind of summarizing how I look at this figure we're describing, Janice, from a metaphysical standpoint.
Yeah, dude. No, I love it, man. That's totally it. Yeah. I mean, makes sense to me.
That was sick. Yeah, very poetic. And the first couple sentences seemed very on the nose
Yeah, exactly.
for polar symbolism, like Mario's been talking about.
Yeah, and when you look at Masonic iconography, symbolism, you're going to see Janice in all of it. And it's going to have some celestial ties, obviously, as well. But it's that as above, so below, that trifecta that we're dealing with. And although Janice often is shown with two heads, you can travel the world and find him with as many as 8. And the Osiris, Isis mythos is exactly with Janus, and the gates or the temples built to Janus were always facing east and west, and they used to close them and open them with the rising and the setting of the sun. That myth kind of got lost in the narrative of the gates were open in times of war and closed when times of peace. But ultimately, you're going to find a lot of solar as well as Uranus. I mean, obviously, I read an excerpt where they described many of these archetypes are encompassed in Janus, and why he's so potently related to Uranus, because Uranus encapsulates almost all of the qualities of the preceding planets, so to say.
So yeah, I love it. And also, guys, annual. If you say something's annual, Janus ruled years and beginnings, doorways. So you see, the beginning of the year is April. Is in the zodiacal year starts in March and April. April means to open the door. Now, in the fiscal year, or like the universal year, we start in January. And that is more.
It's actually
That's
more
the
polar.
beginning. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. It's actually more polar. So
Good
my
point.
understanding is that the winter solstice traditions that followed a polar system, basically, which my opinion is we live in a polar system, not a solar system. That the winter solstice was the beginning of the year, which I think is interesting. That's kind of the common thing, at least here in the West, right? And then the spring equinox is actually more indicative of a solar culture, which makes sense because if Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, what are we doing with astrology? We're following the path of the sun. So astrology is really a solar based system.
Yeah, that's good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, man, someone had a really good comment here.
And by the way, Christmas, where does Santa come from? From the North Pole, right? And so when you really start looking at polar symbolism at the winter solstice and around New Year's, there's so much going on there that I'm pretty convinced that it really is like a polar time of year. Even New Year's Eve, right? It's all centered around midnight. Midnight has been considered a polar time of year, or a northern time of year, or a northern time of day, excuse me.
Yes, that makes sense.
The ball drop.
Yeah. Yep.
Ball drops. Also, Valentine's Day being in Aquarius, you find that 9 months later you have Scorpio, which is so going 2 to 11. Yeah, 2. I don't know if I got that right, but 9 months from Valentine's Day, you have Scorpio, which is why Scorpio is the most common sign of the zodiac, or at least in modern times, because people are very likely to conceive around Valentine's Day. 9 months later, you get Scorpio season. Well, what's that? That's the sign that's ruled by Uranus, Aquarius, going into Scorpio, which is where Uranus exalts. And it's also number 8. Like Ben said, Uranus has an association with the number 8 too. But there's a lot more we can say. There's so much I'm sure we missed out on. But great stuff from these two guests here. And we're just over 2 hours, so we're going to wrap it up. We'll do it soon. Either both of these guys together or separate, regardless. And let's go to here. We've got Ben's YouTube channel, The Archivist. If you'd like to support Ben, go check him out at The Archivist on YouTube. He's also on Twitter, pretty active on Twitter, lots of info there. And anything you want to say to the people, Ben, before we wrap up?
It's been a long time. It's good to see all of you. A lot of familiar faces, and good to be back talking with both of you guys. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. Thanks for being here, man. Great stuff as usual.
Pleasure.
And Mario.
Yeah, dude, this was a great time. I learned a lot. You guys both know your stuff, so much respect. Ben, it was really cool to have you here with your contributions and everything. The Loadstone stuff, man, I mean, I've heard you talk about it at length, obviously, and it's one of my favorite all-time topics. Like, it's so valuable. It's been kind of like a huge thing for me just to get to this point to understand some of like the deep symbolism with what all of that sort of contains and everything else. Once again, symbolicstudies.com if people are interested in my Patreon or readings, things like that. There's definitely stuff that we left on the table, but
if we do this again,
that's how it goes.
I'd love to do maybe work some more geopolitical stuff into the Janice material, show how he's overtly and blatantly used symbolically and cryptically in the geopolitical world, work him into Trump. This new 2025 is a 9. It's a year of of ends. We're wrapping up a cycle. And, again, we can work that into with the Janus stuff. We can talk about some of the Saturnian symbolism that Trump has been using quite heavily lately.
Right.
The idea of this coming golden age and how that relates again to Janus, Uranus, Saturn.
Yeah.
Sports, man. I think if we do this again, we could step away a little bit from the astrotheological and try to get more into the literal world. Yeah. And thanks again. It was a pleasure, Mario. I learned a lot too.
Awesome. No, I would love that. So anyways, with that said, until next time, thanks again, Longo, for putting this together.
You're welcome, man. It's you're the two people I thought of, and it went as well as it could. Also, Janissary. Man, I wish we would have thrown that in there too. But Janissary being kind of like the sheriffs or judges or military leaders in the Ottoman system. But again, can't talk about everything, but that's a real good one to tee off on.
Definitely.
But everyone, thanks for tuning in. Go find these guys if you're not familiar with them already. And see you next time. Adios.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Thanks again.